Did I see you taking a deep breath before we went live?
I thought about that intro was like let's just get ready for the moment, get ready for the show. Like that intro just really gives me that. And I don't know if you appreciate it as much as I do, but I'm so grateful. It gets me ready, man. It gets me ready. So yes, you did see me take a deep breath as we prepared for tonight's episode of In Black and White. Hello all. Thank you so much for joining us on YFNA News. I am Rick Lockhart II.
And I am Mr. Ethan Micheal.
Love the Mr. in front of it. We're so grateful for you joining us. And if you are tuning in and watching on Facebook, go ahead and click that YouTube link. Join us in the discussion over on YouTube while you're there. If you haven't done so already, I don't know what's wrong with you, but definitely subscribe to the channel as we continue to build this channel, this content, and the network. So make sure you subscribe and hit the little alarm bell so that you can get alerts for when all of our content goes live.
So real quick, I'd like to pull the focus to one of our comments on our last video. And this guy, Mikey, said, referring to you and I wouldn't give these two dipshits a buck. They're completely biased opinions, horrific debaters. I didn't know I was trying to debate.
Oh, right, exactly. What? Who is this? Never mind.
Some guy on our YouTube comment section.
Thanks for watching.
I just replied with, "Oh, you're so sweet."
That is so kind of him. This is just the world that we live in of kind people. Anyway, hey, make sure that you get a chance to check out all of the content that we do have, the other shows, including the 13% hosted by Cynthia McDonald and Arthur Ward every Monday night here on YFNA News at 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time, which be mindful of this weekend if people are still setting your clocks. This weekend, we fall back. Do people still set clocks? See, no one sets clocks anymore. Like it was posted around my job, and I'm like, who still sets clocks? Like, I mean, even if you're in your car and you don't manually update your clock, you know that you're an hour off, so you don't even bother it. You know what I mean?
You know who we should have had on tonight as one of the guests in this roundtable, but I didn't realize we were going to be this full. Is we should have had Kendra on, because for those who don't know, starting next week, Kendra will be temporarily taking my place as co-host is In Black and White. I have just I'm so sorry to do this, Rick. I really am.
It feels like a breakup. I mean, Kendra's a great what is it? Relief pitcher, stand-in, substitute, whatever. I don't even want to say substitute because she's actually a teacher. But it just feels like you're breaking up with me. And is it me? Did I do something wrong?
No, never you, Rick. I just had the painful realization through these past few weeks that I honestly just don't know enough politically. And I need to spend the time educating myself and learning more so I can properly refute when people present bullshit. At sometimes I miss it. And it's like, well, that slid by me. Like, I don't want to miss bullshit. I want to be able to call it out every time I see it.
I completely understand. I understand the sentiment. And I have to say that it is a learning process for us all, as we'll be returning back to next month after the election. We might do a little bit of a political discussion and conversation, but getting back to race and racism in America on this platform. I wish you well, but I know that you'll be back. And as long as you'll be back, then I can take this. I can get through this. And Kendra, I know that you're watching. I can't wait to host with you again. She's been on this show before. So if you haven't checked her out, make sure that you do. She's always been a great addition. She's always out there kind of doing some fact checking for us when we need it. So we look forward to having her on the show.
Well, and the good side is now that I'll be producing, while you guys are live, I'll be able to do the fact checking. And, I could pop on from time to time with an occasional sarcastic remark to lighten the mood.
I am looking forward to any and every cameo appearance that you are able to make.
There will be cameos, that's for sure.
Hey, so listen, before we get started, for those of you all that are watching, and again, thank you for you all that are tuning in, I want to take a moment and a point of personal privilege to celebrate, to extend a happy and hearty and heartfelt and warm, huge happy 50th birthday to my dearest brother in love, to my brother, my political go-to resource and coach, the Dr. L. Bernard Jakes. I want to make sure that I get a chance to celebrate him on this show. He's turning 50 today. This is a countdown that's been taking place, that's been happening since I've known him. He is someone, for those of you who think that I exemplify Christianity well, it's because of him and his leadership and his mentoring, his care and concern and his compassion, his empathy, and his ability to just really extend what love looks like. It's because of him, and he deserves this day to be the biggest celebration for him. So I wanted to wish him publicly, and all of you all that are watching, if you could do me a favor and just give him a happy birthday, Dr. Jakes. This is what 50 looks like. I mean, he doesn't look a day over 38, but this is what 50 looks like. And I just can only hope that I get to look that good when I get 50. But happy birthday, Dr. Jakes. I hope you have many more.
Rick, you mean to tell me all these conversations you've been having with atheists hasn't worked yet?
Not at all. Not at all. But keep it up, you know.
I will.
I always enjoy our conversations as much as we get to have.
Hey, Rick, I have faith that I might change your mind one day.
And I have faith that you'll come back to. But anyway, happy birthday, Dr. Jakes. I hope you have a great day celebrating you. I didn't text him because I wanted to do this, so I just tagged him, and hopefully he'll catch up later. Hey, so the election is 1 week away.
Yeah,
this time next week we will
check this out. Next week, do you know what we're going to be doing, Rick? If you're free, or if Cynthia's free, when I go vote, I am going to go see if people are willing to talk to me on camera about who they voted for and why they voted for them. Ideally, I prefer to talk to Trump supporters because I typically already understand why people are voting for Biden, but I still don't understand why people are voting for Trump. And unfortunately, the only reasons I get presented with are freedom, he tells it like it is, and he's a businessman who breaks the system. And those three things really don't hold any water under scrutiny. And I think they're bad reasons. Now, so I would like to get to the bottom of why people truly support Donald Trump. Because if you look back at our roundtables these past few weeks, nearly every reason presented had been refuted by either you, myself, or Kenneth. And a lot of it was just, unfortunately, some of the reasons they were voting for them were just not credible. For example, the greatest economy. Why can they never answer what the greatest economy means, or the greatest country? Why? Why is this the greatest? Healthcare, education, immigration. What are we talking about? What's the greatest? And then it's like, oh, freedom. Okay. Other countries are free. Do you know how many other ones are free? So why? Can someone please tell me why you're voting for Donald Trump? That's all I want to know. That's it.
I mean, they've told you that, Ethan, and that's the thing. That's the unfortunate part, that it's not logical sense, and that's the difficult part to grasp. They've given you reasons, brother. They've said the reasons that, and what I'm getting from it is it's more money over morals. That's really the as I said last week, the black ass bottom line of it. It is money over morals.
Can I use that line?
I think you should. I definitely think so. But hey, while you're talking about that, I went to go vote, as you saw on my. I went to go vote, and I went specifically to an area that I knew would have Trump voters. And can I tell you, I was actually intimidated. I didn't even engage with the Trump supporters who were there. It was an older white man and his father who was like on a cane. They had on the army fatigue design of the Trump support, or the Trump paraphernalia. And as they walked past me, it was jarring for me. And I stepped over to kind of, because where they had to leave was where we were entering, and I wanted to observe social distancing. So I stepped aside. But the lady behind me made it a point to say hello to them, as if to say, I acknowledge you, I see you, I support you too, we support each other. Like that was her hi. It wasn't like a friendly hi. And I was legit, like I walked in with my rainbow lanyard that I got from a pride parade, because, you know, I wanted to show that I'm black and gay, so you could probably bet this is a Biden vote walking in. But it was the fatigued design Trump that support or paraphernalia that it really gave me some uneasiness. Like when they walked towards me, I thought they were going to say something, but it was the lady behind me who did. So I took it upon myself to say hello to the only one other black person who was there, who happened to be a poll worker. But anyway, we're going to get into that too, the election. But hey, if you're going out to talk to Trump supporters, man, it's one thing to talk to them on camera and virtually. It's another thing to actually be confronted.
I'm excited.
I bet you are.
I really am excited, and I have no problem getting in the middle, of heated situations. I'm pretty responsible, I think, and careful. Not saying other people, obviously I can't say how they'll react, but I can tell you this: where I am going is it's in a fairly. Is hick a bad word? Are we supposed to use hick? Is hick not allowed anymore?
Hey, you have to talk to your white brothers and sisters about that. I don't know. I haven't kept up on the tabs of what is allowable and what's not in the white community. I'm sorry.
As a white person, I'm going to say hick's okay, even though I'm not hick, so maybe hick isn't okay. Either way, I'm going to a hick town to vote because that's where I'm still registered. So yeah.
Good luck.
I don't have any Biden paraphernalia. I almost wish I did, but at the same time, I don't, because that'll immediately get them defensive. So I'm just going to go vote, bring my camera, and see if people are willing to talk to me.
Well, if I'm able to get that day off of work, then I will make sure that we're able to host that conversation with you.
I took a half day that day just so I could do it.
Well, technically you're supposed to get 2 hours either at the front of your shift or at the end of your shift to go vote anyway. So there is that. You don't even have to take off a full half. I don't know. Whatever works. One
last thing. It's sad, but my ex was like, is there any way you could spend the night here that night? Or because honestly, I'm kind of scared of what the people in my area will do. And, I constantly hear the right talking about the left, but the right can be just as violent. And, I don't think one side's at fault over the other. I think they're both at fault, but the town she's in, it's going to be the right. And that kind of scares me.
So I want you to know that I requested the following day off of work on purpose, just so there's either going to be drinking out of celebration or drinking out of depression. It's one of the two.
All right, I'll join you in that, because honestly, man, I really can't stand 4 more years of this dude. Like, I mean, yeah, no.
Blubbery. Hey, wait, but did you see? He left his supporters out in the cold. At least that's what everybody's saying at his Omaha rally. Did you catch that?
Yes.
32 degrees. 7 people, I believe, had to go to the hospital for hypothermia because they were stranded on an airport base.
They really stranded?
The issue is what they're doing is, I guess they have the people who are attending, the attendees, park somewhere like miles away and bus them to the airport property where the rally is taking place. So once the rally was over, he flew off in Air Force One, and there were no buses to come and pick the people up.
Wow. And real quick, before we get to our guests, which we really got to get started in just a moment, I'd like to talk about the Oath Keepers. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not. Is this some type of conspiracy group?
No, actually, no conspiracy group. They are a far right extreme group, right-wing group made up of police and military who typically oppose the government. And I'll have to I should put the podcast link in the description. It's a great listen from NPR. And they talk about the danger of this group and how this man's been interviewing them for several months and how they're preparing for a civil war. And for some odd reason, even though this group is far right, they weren't behind the previous president, George Bush, because they didn't feel he aligned with their politics. However, this far right group is behind Trump.
Of course.
And they're ready for a civil war.
Of
and they
course.
have thousands of members.
Of course. Like what year are we in? I can't even do this. I can't do the fact that people are threatening a civil war. Like this is 2020, guys. Like wake up. Seriously, that's the Civil War is not the answer. That's not going to resolve or solve anything. Like, let that go. Shout out to all the people who are voting early, though. I don't know what that means. We'll probably get into that a little bit later. But like I told you before, some of the Gen Z kids I was worried about, they've gotten out and vote. My little cousin David, he actually registered to vote and went to vote. And I have a buddy, Stanley, aka the Cali Kid, who lives in LA, just moved to LA, flew all the way back to Florida to vote early. There is a pandemic going on, but this man said, I am going to fly back to where I'm registered from LA to Florida to vote. Shout out to all the early voters, man.
You know, I should probably go early vote on Friday because I do have a half day Friday. And that way, in case anything happens Tuesday, you know, I don't want any right wing getting mad at me or flipping out. So maybe I should secure my vote in advance before I go start poking in people's faces.
MSNBC says, plan your vote. I think that's what you just did there, Ethan. So let's get ready to bring our panel on.
Well, let's start with our first returning guest. I would say best way to identify him, conservative libertarian, Angelo. I don't know how to say your last name, dude. How do I say your last name? Mazzei? You're muted.
You're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that, gentlemen. It would be Matz. Like Mazzei. Okay, Mazzei is how you pronounce it. Like,
yes. I can't wait to use that in our example of voting for judges later. Mazzei, thank you for pronouncing that for me. We also have joining us the host. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And next up, we have the Godless Granny, and you can check her out at youtube.com/godlessgranny. She, like myself, is a fellow atheist and I believe liberal leaning.
Oh,
is that accurate?
Yes.
Is that big in the atheist community? Liberal leaning?
Yes, it pretty much goes. I'll put it to you like this: when you find a Trump supporter atheist, it happens. It does. They are like a four-leaf clover. It's not at all common. Now, to be clear, atheism has nothing to do with politics at all. It's just the answer on one question and one question alone. Do you believe in God? But at least in my experience, most atheists become secular humanists, and I don't think it's possible to be a secular humanist and Republican. I could be wrong. I really could, but I don't think it's possible.
They exist. There's quite a few very popular writers that are.
But following the tenets of secular humanism, I don't know how you could vote Republican. Although at the same time, I don't really know how it gets you to a Democratic vote either. I'm just talking out of my ass at this point. Let's get on to the next guest. Here is the co-host of 13% and 1/3 of YFNA News, Cynthia McDonald.
Hey, y'all.
Welcome. And for those of you that need to know that are watching, that fabulous intro that you saw that gets me pumped up and fired up ready for our show was created by Cynthia McDonald. She's the creator of that. So reach out to her for any of those creative needs that you also might need to as well. I'm blowing you up, Cynthia.
Blow.
And then clarification, Cynthia, you're left leaning, but you're not voting for either Biden or Trump, correct?
That is correct. I voted third party.
Okay, thank you. And next up, we haven't seen this man in quite some time. I'd like to welcome back Mr. Richard Graves. Richard, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you all for having me on here. Good to talk to you all again.
I got to say, it's always exciting to talk to a Republican who is opposed to Donald Trump. It's not common. Or, well, I guess now it's becoming more common. But
it is.
And that, lastly, Mr. Kenneth Leonard, the nutting.
Kenneth made it. Wow.
Leastly.
Did we call him the non-YouTuber?
No, I'm an out YouTuber now. So, yes.
Before we get this lovely party started, I would just one thing: everyone be mindful not to talk over each other. If anyone talks too long, we will not necessarily cut you off, but try to move on to the next person, because we want this to be a free-flowing conversation where everyone gets to offer their 2 cents. And hopefully, my goal of this is maybe we can change some people's minds just by presenting good information.
Well, and I guess let me get started with one important question. Please let me know who all has voted already. Who's voted already? Yeah. So Ethan, you're the only one. Just want to put that out there. Why is it
Thanks.
early?
I'm going Friday. That's for sure.
Oh man. Okay. So everyone pretty much has already cast their vote, so it's not really changing anything here. But the conversation I think is important to have. And I guess we can get started with the third party voters, because I believe we have. I'm not sure, Godless Granny, which direction you went in with your vote, but I'm sure Angelo and Cynthia, third party voters. A lot of people, and Angelo, we kind of talked about this a little bit on the show last week, are going after the third party votes, saying that it's a wasted vote, right? I'd really like to hear from both of you your perspective, your answer to why that's not throwing away a vote, or how that isn't a vote win for Trump. Because a lot of people will say that's a vote win for Trump, not voting for Biden.
Great start. I like that.
Thanks, Ethan.
Okay. Do you want me to start with you, or can I
No,
let
go ahead. Let's do it via alphabetical order.
Oh, okay, very well. Well, I'll go with the easiest explanation to make it understandable to most people. No matter the least common denominator, or the most common denominator here is, if you do in fact vote third party, at the very least, this sends a message to the other two parties saying that there are broader issues, that they need to expand their horizon as far as their talking points, that we are a large nation of 340 million people, and two parties is simply not sufficient. So if, let's just say, hopefully this time around, and Kendra helped me out last time, I had my percentage wrong, but the amount of votes incorrect. Gary Johnson received 4.6 million votes roughly, and about 3.25% of the popular vote as a libertarian candidate. If Joe Jorgensen can somehow pull out 4%, we're talking, depending on the voter turnout, but we're talking anywhere between 5 million and 6 million people. That is 5 to 6 million people in our country, which I think we can agree 5 to 6 million people is quite a number, even though we are a nation of 340 odd million people. It sends a message to the other two parties that there's a section of our citizens that are to the point where they're not going to vote for you. So that in itself is a net benefit to our country as a whole.
Okay. Cynthia, what do you have?
What Angelo said. but also what I would also add to it is that I know for me personally, even though I do not like Trump at all, I do not support that man. I did not vote for him in 2006. Just be clear. But at the same time, the alternative for Biden was not at all good enough for me, especially when I looked at him as a senator, when I looked at him as a vice president, when I looked at his running mate, when I looked at the measures that they were running on, and what I feel is important to me as far as like agenda items, they just weren't there. So I was not compelled to vote for him at all. And I also really have a big problem with the binary system that we're currently in the United States, because as Angelo said, if we are a nation of millions of people, whether if you're just a Democrat or a Republican, is just not good enough. And oftentimes we're just herded into these particular sections on how to vote, when oftentimes neither party really answers or talks to the sensibilities of a large electorate. So to kind of divert from that leaning, and also, still, and I also voted third party because I wanted to make sure that my vote wasn't, cast out, because I know that there's other measures that's on the ballot that you want to make sure that, are being looked at and things of that nature. I wanted to make sure that was done. And I also wanted to, say, like, the choices that you guys gave us is not good enough. So I'm not going with those choices.
Now, and let me ask too, between the two of you, because I can't remember if you both went the same third party, because I know at least in Illinois there were 6 presidential candidates on the ballot.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
Which party did you go with, Angelo and Cynthia?
I voted green.
I'm sorry. What was it?
Which party did you go with? Did you go green or libertarian?
Libertarian, both this election and in 2016.
Okay, so what we have in this situation then would be like third and fourth party in a sense, and as I don't know, I guess the concern is that voting third party does give the implication that we need a third or fourth party or additional parties, to say the least. But as I believe it was John the Atheist, I think it was, that said that doesn't create the change that we essentially will need when it comes to the 2-party system that we have. Kenneth or Richard or Godless Granny, let me go to you, Godless Granny, because I'm not familiar with where your vote went. Maybe share with us a little bit about you being leaning left, where your vote ended up.
I did end up voting for Biden, and if I had my druthers, I would have been voting for either Bernie or Elizabeth Warren. But they weren't on the ticket, and I understand perfectly well why they weren't on the ticket. And the reason they weren't on the ticket is Bernie was not a Democrat. He ran as a Democrat because he knew that as a third-party candidate, he didn't have a chance, so he had to run as a Democrat, even though he does not really consider himself a Democrat, and he's actually never even joined the Democratic Party. But and Warren and the other candidates, nobody had enough support to carry the party, and so the party, knowing that the most important thing is to win, picked who they thought was the most, the candidate that had the best chance. Really what we need, though, is to overhaul the system. We spend so much money on the elections. It is pathetic. I mean, we get dumped with, all these ads, phone calls, texts, and none of us want this. And can you imagine what we could do for our education system if we put this money into education instead of wasting it on advertising that nobody wants to see? Like in Australia, they have limits on the number on how much money each candidate can spend. And if we had that kind of a system, then we could have more candidates. We could have more parties because it wouldn't be a rich man's system.
Whew. Good point.
Real quick, I'd like to jump to Kenneth and get your thoughts on on Angelo and Cynthia's position on wanting to get a third party out there.
I respect where they're coming from. I just don't think that it's that in practice it gets us any closer to where it sounds like they'd like us to be. Green Party got 1% of the vote in 2016. There's just not enough momentum behind the ideas of any of the third-party candidates to drive that kind of change that's gonna draw enough of the electorate away to where the major 2 parties are going to take note. My opinion is that anything other than voting for one of the 2 candidates in the system that we have of having a primary choice only, you get one choice on the ballot type of system, I think is essentially throwing your vote away. I think that the thing to do would be to vote for the candidate who you think is frankly the lesser of 2 evils, and then work to reform the system after we've put out the fire, so to speak. So moving towards something like approval voting, something like ranked choice voting, seems like a very good idea to start to erode the power of the 2-party system. It just seems like now is sort of an interesting time to try to make the decision. Yeah.
May I speak to that?
Let me get Richard in on this for 1 second, and you could follow up. Richard, what are your thoughts?
I agree with Kenneth in regard to what he said about third-party voting. In this particular point in history, I understand that it's in essence a protest vote. However, the major parties, the Democratic and Republican Party, if you look at your state legislature, you look at the statutes that have been passed regarding how the primary system and how those primary elections are run, the Democratic and the Republican Party, both private organizations, have pretty much rent-seeked legislation their way since the FDR administration to make them part of the political process. No amount of third-party voting is going to change that. It has to be changed at the legislative level in order to. It's sort of as if Coca-Cola or Pepsi passed laws over the last 60 years to make them the only two sodas that you can choose from. There's really nothing you can do until you change those laws, no matter how much independent voting you do. And plus, if you look at, and it doesn't matter in Illinois whatsoever. The state's going to go blue no matter what. In regard to the swing states where it does matter, for example, Wisconsin, Trump won Wisconsin by 23,000 votes, and there were 39,000 independent votes. And now you have your conservative court now because of that. So if these independent voters in some cases had manned up and voted for Hillary, we wouldn't be having the judge problem we have right now. So sometimes you got to play a little bit of chess and not checkers. You got to see the long game here and understand what is futile. If you're really trying to change something, you need to know what it is you're actually trying to change. And the rent sinking that's put these guys, the Democratic Republican Party, have made themselves part of the political process in a way that it would take us to actually look at each individual state legislation to weed that out. They've passed a lot of laws in the last 90 years or so that have put themselves in that position.
Go ahead, Angelo.
Real quick follow-up for Richard. So would you have, if it was Hillary or Trump, would you vote for Hillary over Trump?
I did vote for Hillary over Trump. I made the decision to vote for Hillary as soon as Trump won the primary. I was working for Governor Case's campaign. And when Trump won the primary, which we pretty much knew he would, there was no other option in order for me to try to keep him from becoming president. That was my only objective at that time. I knew that Hillary, I'm not a fan of Hillary's politics in a lot of areas. I am a conservative. However, I believe Trump, and I continue to say this, is an existential threat to the world, period. And it was something, sometimes you got to go bigger than party and you got to look at the real problem, what's going to, and I knew the judges were going to be a problem. I knew that he would appoint at least one. He's appointed 3 now, and that's going to have ramifications for everybody for the next 40, 50 years. And honestly speaking, with that court, the legislation I'm talking about, if you start challenging when it gets up to the Supreme Court, guess what? They've stacked the deck there. So again, you have to understand these parties, both of them have etched themselves into the American political system in a way that they'd have to be taken out by a lot of state and federal legislation needs to be reversed. And now you got a court that's stacked conservative. You think they're going to allow that to happen? Not going to happen. So we kind of set ourselves up for failure with this one. I don't blame third-party voters particularly for this, but in those swing states, some of the numbers show that if those votes had went to Hillary, we wouldn't have we wouldn't have Trump as president, and we wouldn't have that court so stacked right now against working class people and consumers.
Thanks, Richard. Angelo, you had a follow-up on that.
Yeah, well, to both Kenneth and Richard. First, to Kenneth's comment, the comment of our system is not designed for that. I don't misquote you. Exactly what did you say, Kenneth? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I was saying that in a system where we've got like primary choice voting, that voting for third-party candidates isn't effective. It was essentially the point I was making.
Well, for starters, it's, how do I put this properly? Our system that has been created, or that was created in this country, our government, was never designed to have just 2 parties. In fact, up until roughly the 1850s, there were 4 major political parties, or 1860s, there were 4 major political parties at least in this country: the Federalist Party, the Whig Party, the Republican Party didn't come along until 1860. And I will speak to that. It isn't as if the Republican Party just manifested out of thin air, with Abraham Lincoln. It was many years in the making to get that party to where it got to the point where actually Abraham Lincoln was elected as president as a Republican in our country. So I will have to disagree on that point. They have done a very good job. It has been a concerted effort on behalf of both parties to convince you that we have to have a binary choice in this matter. Now, as far as Richard is concerned, in his comments, the swing votes, the 39,000 votes in Wisconsin that could have swung the vote one way or the other. I understand the mentality, and it's something that I those of us that vote third party are constantly in this battle, and use the cliche, if you will, sometimes you have to play chess and not checkers. Well, to be honest with you, it's exactly what a third party vote would be doing. We're not playing checkers. Checkers would be in the sense of the simplistic form that we actually have a shot at winning, which anybody that has a modicum of common sense in their head that votes third party know that we don't have a chance at winning right now. So there's that. Secondly, this notion that of all elections to choose, why are you choosing this one to vote third party? That is the same trope that we hear every single time the presidential cycle is upon us every 4 years. This is nothing new. Okay, show me an election that wasn't very important. This is always my point.
When Kennedy and Nixon happened important?
50 years. I'm sorry.
I feel like we didn't hear that during like Kennedy and Nixon's election. Was it Kennedy and Nixon?
I heard it. I've been voting obviously since 18, so roughly 24 years. I definitely heard it in 16. I definitely heard it in 2012. I for sure heard it in what?
Sorry, I just want to say, in Angelo's defense, I actually do agree with him. I have heard this every election.
In our lifetime, yes.
So I get it. Now, in order to play chess, we have to start making some progress in order to get ourselves to a point. And I'll end with this, and then we'll go, obviously pass it to somebody else. But sometimes you have to concede a battle in order to win the war. Okay, I mean that's something that needs to happen. And there's a couple different ways how I could put that forth and how that makes sense. But I agree with you, Richard, that we do need to focus a little bit more on the House and getting a libertarian. Actually, we did have one libertarian in Justin Amash as in the House, and making progress in that end to actually have true effect on legislation.
If I can I got you, Richard, real quick, but to help me understand a little bit, because I'm not the political expert here and how these systems work, but I need some help with identifying the missing key player here, which is the Electoral College, right? So I essentially, what we're talking about is when you have third party voting or libertarian versus green, because I thought about you while I voted green for the Water Reclamation District Board here in Cook County. I felt like Green Party would be the best party for that. But when you look at how the Electoral College is set up, how do third party votes? How can third party votes even have a voice in a system that, when you have the Electoral College, that's kind of like rigged to vote either red or blue depending on the majority of their state, right? Like how does that work?
I think that Angelo had to jump off a camera real quick. Could you just backtrack this really quick when you were talking about a third party as far as like how it affects the Electoral College?
The essence of my question is, I've never seen the Electoral College or heard about the Electoral College voting third party. Mm-hmm. Right. So
they can.
Well, I'm sure they can. I'm 100%. I believe that they can. But do they ever? Like, have they ever?
So I will.
Because Trump lost the popular vote, right?
I will say this, and this is from what has been, fed to me as far as like the Electoral College goes, is that, depending on how that particular state, the popular vote goes in that state, that's going to drive the Electoral College and how they will vote. Now, depending on the state and how they set up their particular rules, that can go any kind of way. And we saw that in 2016. But one of the things that I would say when it comes to even how we vote and how the system goes, and especially when you're talking about legislatively, a lot of these things are actually going to be driven by if people will accept it or not. One of the things that we've been so used to doing is voting Democratic or Republican. I know that ever since that I was 18, I have voted Democrat. This is the very first election that I ever divulged from voting that way. And oftentimes I felt the same way that, hey, voting third party is a wasted vote, you know. But the more that I actually thought about it, especially this particular election cycle, the more I said, well, you know, the only reason why it's considered a wasted vote is because we accept it. You know, we accept it as a whole, as an electorate, as a people. When we go to the polls, polls every election cycle, this is what we do, right? But if you have more and more people actually breaking from that particular format, you know, that's going to me, that's going to be something that's going to denote some type of change. Now, one of the things I will also say on the local level, that if for some reason there will be more third-party candidates that actually ran for different offices, like, you know, maybe on the municipal or the state, that we can actually, you know, kind of touch and speak with, and things of that nature, who are actually speaking to the people's values in that area, you know, I do believe that they do have a shot. But again, that would be something that we as the people are going to actually be pushing, because if we did that, if we have more people breaking away, saying like, you know what, I'm not jiving with this system, and I'm going to, and more people are going to actually go that particular route, I do believe that's going to denote some type of change. Either that change is going to happen within the larger conglomerates of the parties that we are, you know, constantly engaging, whether it be a Democratic or Republican, or there's going to be an avenue where more third-party candidates will have actual shot of getting in office.
I agree that that change should happen at the local level. I know Richard wanted to jump in and respond earlier.
Let's get. We still got to get back to Godless Granny and let her respond as well.
Let Richard go first, and I.
Sounds good.
Let Richard go first, and let me go right after him, because I have a feeling we're going to say about the same thing.
Richard, you're on mute.
Richard.
Okay, briefly, in regard to two things. One, on the local level, yes, it's more probable and more useful for third-party candidates to run on a local level, even at a state level. Sometimes I know Justin Ventura won as an independent candidate. I believe he might have been Libertarian in Minnesota, I believe it was. So it can happen on that level. And it can happen on a national level if enough people decide that they're tired of one way or the other, but that assumes that most people are tired of one or the other. You're assuming that these people who are voting for Trump or Biden actually would vote for a third-party candidate and are not in line with the politics of the people they're choosing. That's an assumption. Second thing is, as far as importance of this election, you have the only living Republican president endorsing the Democratic nominee. If you don't think that is unusual, I suggest you look at history for the last 100 years. You will not see that happening. You have the actual last Republican president who will not endorse a sitting Republican president. That should let you know there's a lot going on here, and it's very serious. This is not business as usual in any way, shape, or form, regardless if you believe so or not. Secondly, your example, the Whigs and the Republicans, the Whigs did transform to the Republican Party. At that time, though, the Whigs nor the Democratic Republicans or any of the parties in our country had made themselves part of the political process by legislation. If you look at your state statutes, if you look at some of the federal statutes, they have ingrained themselves within the system. With some permanence that will take some doing to undo, and it will cause some court cases that will challenge the rules that they put into place that kind of lock out third-party candidates, especially on the national level. So there's something we need to do before we start voting third party. In my opinion, we need to get the system changed where that can be effective on the level we're talking about right now. Now, as far as people who choose to vote third party, I'm not saying that they're stupid, nor am I saying that they're wasting their vote. I think you should vote the way you feel you should want to vote. You should vote for who you want to vote for. I agree with you on that. But the point is, this is not business as usual. George Bush and the rest of those neocons would not be endorsing Biden if this was business as usual.
Go ahead, Granny. Godless Granny.
Okay, a couple of things. First, the question came up about what should the Electoral College do, but there was a political discussion among legal scholars on this topic about 4 or 5 months ago. Can the Electoral College deviate from what the popular vote is? And the answer well, I shouldn't say the popular vote, but the vote of the state, because sometimes the state isn't exactly even you've got to go by the district. But the response came up that the Electoral College must vote the way that their state did. There are some states that allow the delegates to split their votes depending on a particular district that they represent. But if your district went a certain way, you have to vote that way. And if you fail to vote that way, it's just going to go to the courts and get overturned. So as far as a third party being able to get the electoral votes, they've got to win it within the districts that the electoral delegates are from before that's ever going to happen. But also speaking to what Angelo said about this, we always hear that this election is important, and yes, there's always some people that think that this election is important, but never before in the history of when those of us here have been alive. Now, Richard, you might be older than me, I'm not sure, but if you're not, then I'm the oldest one here. My first time voting was in 1980, and I voted for, I'm ashamed to admit it, Ronald Reagan. And yeah, we always hear this election is so important, but never have our lives been on the line the way they are this time. The pandemic, Trump just is not doing anything to take care of us in the pandemic. The racial riots and the violence, he's fanning the flames of the violence. He's not bringing anything down. The Green New Deal, Trump took us out of the Paris Accords. Trump is getting rid of environmental protections. And if we don't get climate change get a handle on it in the next 10 years, it's going to become irreversible. And so, just if nothing else, to save the planet and to save the future generations, we've got to get rid of the current administration.
Whew. Yes, I just felt that it felt so good to hear. But hey, well, let me ask, and I want to pose this question to Cynthia, because you've been a big advocate of promoting voting down ballot, although you did participate at the top of the ballot just to make sure that your vote counted here in Illinois, meaning that to be a full thing. Just to kind of start us off in this discussion, help us understand what voting down ballot means.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. It's just voting down ballot mostly just means to make sure that you're voting down the ticket, because I think that oftentimes people have a tendency to just focus on the executive branch, and they kind of forget that we have all types of different offices that have to be filled as well, including judges. So it's important in order for you to be able to participate in your entire ballot, not just the top of the ticket. Now, oftentimes, depending on what state you are, and I think that there is, don't quote me, I want to say 32 states where you can do a write-in candidate. That's what I want to say, but don't quote me. But some of the states like Illinois, you have to register that particular write-in, right? So if that's the case, if you leave it blank, oftentimes your ballot will be thrown out depending on where you are. I know that one of the Professor Eddie Glob, who also is a MSNBC contributor, was actually advocating for a blank out campaign in 2016, where you just left the top of the ticket actually blank. And you made sure that you filled in all the other offices for other candidates that was running. And like I said before, depending on what state you're in, if you do that, you are at risk that you're going to get your ballot thrown out. So that's why I didn't do it here. But in essence, the short answer of it is just making sure that you are participating on the entire ticket, down the ticket, but the top of the ticket either leave blank or divulge completely from Republican or Democratic party.
Thank you. So, Kenneth, I want to bring you into this for a second because I'm curious to know your response to voting down ballot, what that sounds like to you, and what impact that may have on the election turnout.
I mean, I'm not sure what impact it would have on turnout, but I think that the message that more people need to be paying attention to their state and local elections is huge. The impact that the local elected officials have on you is often much more immediate than what's happening at the federal level. Of course, that depends on person and their circumstances, but just paying attention as like a foundational level of the down ballot movement there, just paying attention to what's going on and being engaged and involved. I think that's an extremely valuable thing to be promoting to people.
So, and I again thought about you all as I was voting down ballot, Cynthia specifically, but Angelo came second in my thought process here. As I got to, I think it was a congressional vote, and there was an independent on the ballot, and I'm like, here's a great opportunity, voting down ballot and third party, all in the same vote. So I took that upon myself, and I felt that was the protest that I shared in with you all. Richard, it looked like you had a comment about the voting down ballot. You kind of set up there. I'm concerned about your response to the voting of down ballot.
I had no response. I just was glad she explained it. That's all. I was curious as what it meant. So now I know.
I saw the setup. I was really prepared for that. But let me ask you, Cynthia and Angelo, in the places that you voted, since you've already cast your vote, did you vote third party in the areas where you could vote third party? For example, independent, libertarian, green, even if your party that you don't normally identify with as a third party was or wasn't running. For example, the congressional seat that had an independent did not have a libertarian, did not have a green vote, a green party candidate. It only had an independent candidate, right? So did you take that opportunity to just vote in a third party as if to say, we need more parties, so here's my vote for this third person or this third party, just because it's here down the ballot?
Right. I know for me that actually the majority of my ticket was Democratic, and a lot of it was because like my congressional district, the congressperson here went unchallenged, so I just ended up voting for them anyway, and I don't completely hate them. So therefore, I went ahead and voted for them. Now, as far as for Senate, I did vote third party. I voted green because I like David Blackman, I think that his name is. I kind of like, I like a lot of the things that he actually stands for and that he's pushing. For water rec, I voted, one Democrat, but then again, I was actually able to speak with her because she came to a candidate forum that we did before COVID, killed everything, right? And so I did get a chance to speak with her, and I was like, okay, cool, you got my vote, sis. And then two other people on the water rec, I did vote green. And all the judges on my ballot were Democrat to vote for, and a lot of them went unopposed. But it was kind of interesting that a lot of the judges where they were asking you, should you retain their seat? I was like, no, oh hell no. One guy,
I'm glad you brought that up, Cynthia.
Yeah, one guy, I remember his commercials, and he scared the living shit out of me. Okay, yes. And I was like, yeah, oh hell no, do not retain this person whatsoever. So I was just but one of the things I also would like to say, because like I was so adamant about really being engaged in down ballot initiatives, I made sure that I researched my ballot as best as I could, just to make sure that I was voting intelligently. Because I think that, as Richard was talking about, and Kenneth too, that I don't think a lot of people really don't understand how very important local elections are. Like, you know, like who your state representative is and who your congressional member is. I mean, because unless, and I'll say this just for happenstance. Say for, all right. Let's just say, for instance, Trump wins again. And, but you have a Democratic, I know, y'all, it's okay. But I'm not saying it's okay for him to win. I'm just saying if it happens.
Right, exactly.
If it happens. If you have, let's say, a more left-leaning or Democratic Congress, you know, especially in the Senate, you know, that can really help mitigate a lot of issues that comes up with this president. Because presidents don't have all the power ever in life. They're not a dictator. Even though Trump wants it to be that way, he is not. There are checks and balances that's in place, and Congress can be a huge check on the president. So, and I think that's why it's really important just to, you know, really to stay engaged as far as like all these officers are concerned, just to make sure that, you know, if anything, make sure that the person that you want representing you in all of these places is the right person that you're giving your vote to.
You know, I said this once before, that the two things I wanted to see in this election, I wanted to see Pete Buttigieg debate Trump on a national stage, and I wanted him to exert all the gayness that he could in that debate against Trump. I wanted to see it. I really did. And the other thing I want to see is a Democratic Senate take over if Trump wins. Even if he doesn't, I would like to see a Democratic Senate, because this current Senate has this kind of shit. But I wanted to see a Democratic Senate, especially if Trump won, because he'd blow his top.
If we could, let's try and dive into some of the issues right now, or differences between Trump and Biden. Kenneth, starting with you, when people say, when Donald Trump says that we have the greatest economy, or, you know, what does that mean to you? Is our economy doing better in any way, from your opinion?
Have you ever heard of John Rawls, Ethan?
I haven't.
John Rawls, he's a philosopher. He came up with this idea of a veil of ignorance, that if people were talking about how to set up a society, that the way to do it would be to set it up as if you could not predict who you would be in that society, and then make it so that it's fair for you no matter where you start out from. So whether you're, you know, black, white, male, female, you know, straight, gay, or wherever you happen to, whoever you are, that you've got a fair start. So when someone asks me if the economy is strong, or if the economy is working, or if it's a great economy, the question is, well, for some people it's great, but who are we talking about here? You look at real earnings for Americans have not gone up. You look at, you know, the percentage of the gross domestic product of growth that goes to the workers, it's stayed at zero for you know, well over 3 decades. So if you're a billionaire in this country, the economy it's crushing it. It's all home runs all the time. But if you're, you know, a single mom trying to make ends meet, then we have an absolutely abysmal economy.
That's what do you think about that?
Well, I was actually going to bring Angelo into that conversation.
Oh, sorry, you're right. We have kind of missed Angelo. Sorry.
I mean, hey, he's the resident economist.
Angelo, I noticed something. So, you know, you had talked to me briefly about possibly like filling in for me or taking my spot. Is that why you're wearing the backwards hat now?
It was a little nod to you. No, more like, truth be told, I haven't left the house yet today, and I didn't feel like, you know, my hair was a mess. So I'm like, oh, I'll just throw a hat on.
Always works. It always works.
Okay, so as far as the economy is concerned, okay, and I said this in 2012, and I'll say it again right now, okay? A president only has so much influence over the economy. It's just one aspect, okay? That's that. Two, the amount of factors that go into what or what makes up our economy they're vast. There are 4 or 5 key factors, but when we talk about, as Kenneth did, about how there has been stagnant growth in middle income, which he's 100% correct, as far as the percentage-wise, as far as how people have been going forward and making more money in certain sectors of the economy and different classes, whereas the middle class, essentially, that baseline really hasn't moved all that much, okay? In years past, there have been, several different ways that, have kind of counterbalanced that, if you will, or there's such thing as going on strike, okay? And this is going to become as a shock to some people, but as a libertarian, I believe we believe in voluntary association. That means whatever you do consensually or whatever is done consensually between adults is just fine by me, so long as you don't violate anyone else's rights. So my reply to that is the middle class needs to have a better understanding as far as where their position is. And if the idea is that we need to increase those wages, it needs to happen organically, and it cannot happen from the government. Okay, it cannot happen from the government because time and time again, and if I had more time, I could show you these examples and cite them for you, where the government has tried to step in with all the best intentions. Okay, and for those coming from an atheist, I always love using this expression: the road to hell truly is paved with good intentions. Okay, they continually mess it up. Okay, Lord Keynes himself probably those will say that he's the greatest economist that has ever been in the last 100 years. And he was a brilliant man. Towards the end of his life, actually countered his own points that he made as a younger man, that he was wrong, that he was incorrect on some of his prepositions. And so his accolades were very influential in many different economies throughout the world. And even he said it. Okay, Keynesian economics is not the way forward. It is not how to substantiate constant growth, steady growth. It is not a way to organize an economy. It can be something that can be done to help stimulate certain things. But what we have done, and I'll end it with this, is we have found ourselves in a constant loop of using Keynesian economics to try and remedy the situation, when what we really need to do is have to understand 2 things. One, voluntary association. So if there's enough people in a workforce that say, hey, we don't agree with these wages, then go on strike and do it, okay? It takes motivation. Guess what? I'm sorry, it takes real effort. You have to coordinate with other people that are like-minded with you and get together and say, look, we're not working for this wage, and walk out. So there's that, okay? 2, yes.
No, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
So 2, shoot, now I lost my train of thought. And 2, when it comes to this approach of economics, which is pretty much Keynesian economics as it is, because we are a fiat currency, and which I don't want to even get into that. I don't want to digress into what that is and how that works. But basically, we've taken this approach, especially after 2008, is pumping a bunch of money into the economy and thinking that that's going to fix it. Okay? No, it doesn't. All that does is lead to boom and bust. That's all it does, because it's not organic. It needs to be. You need to have true demand, true supply and demand in an economy, and it must be organic, and it has to be led by the people themselves. And I'll leave you with that.
So if I can real quick, just kind of switch lanes just a bit, because I know that there's this big conversation around the tax plan that Trump has laid out, which I don't recall him actually laying out anything, versus what Biden has laid out, that he's not taxing anyone under $400,000. Here in Illinois on the ballot, I just want to switch lanes for a quick second, because this is something that's on our ballot in Illinois, the fair tax amendment. Right, a lot of people are still kind of confused. But Richard, I saw on your post, and I supported this, that you posted, you voted for Biden, you voted for Harris, and you voted yes for the tax amendment, as did I. I'm wondering, first off, and I think Cynthia, you posted, I mean, you voted for the tax amendment too as well. Kenneth, I'm not sure if you did, but I'm wondering how that's really going to play into the affecting, if at all, the affecting of our economy, specifically in Illinois.
I'm sorry, was that you?
Well, it was more either Richard, Cynthia, Kenneth, if you voted for it. Like, is that how is voting yes going to
Richard, you're right.
Oh, okay, I was waiting for the economist to answer.
Oh,
Right.
I can turn that over to Angelo. I don't know. The thing is, Angelo, I don't know how much you know about the Fair Tax Amendment.
I do. I do know a lot about it, actually. I've read about it.
So then I'll go ahead and pose it over to you, because it sounds like quite a few. Let me ask Kenneth first. Kenneth, what was your vote for the Fair Tax Amendment?
Well, I got to speak. I'm a government employee, so I got to speak generally about about policies. But the idea that we're going to vote to allow the legislature to impose higher tax burdens on wealthier people, I think is a no-brainer. I think that.
So gotcha.
Yeah, you look at the history of our country. I mean, you look at economic growth. I think since World War II. Okay. You can look at after World War II, you had Richard might have some interesting thoughts about this. You've got Roosevelt coming in with this big government agenda. You've got taxes that are pretty high, and you've got the explosion of the largest middle class that the world's ever seen. You've got economic growth like nowhere else ever that continued up until those taxes stayed pretty much where they were at until Reagan. So the idea that raising taxes on wealthy people is going to have anything but a positive effect on the economy and take the pressure off of the working class people, I don't see where people get that from. I think it's a myth.
I have a real quick. I have a follow-up question, Kenneth, or anyone. I have heard, and I'm not I haven't read the thing in its entirety, so. I've heard several people say that what this fair tax is also allowing is it removes, or it gives them permission to actually change your taxes at any time. So even though, say, yours and mine aren't going up, because we're voting for it, they could at a later time. It gives them the power to do that. Is that?
That is not true.
Yeah,
that is not true. Let me tell you why it's not true. I've heard the Illinois Policy Institute and a bunch of very rich people who put a very lot of money, $50 million, to push that narrative. It is patently false. The General Assembly still has to use the mechanism by which they are to raise taxes, if they choose to raise taxes at any time, through a vote and through a bill being signed by the governor. The only thing that this amendment does regarding the tax rate is it allows for when taxes, instead of all of us being raised from 4.95 to 7.95, it allows them to say, okay, we're going to keep this group at 4.95 and we're going to raise this group up to 7.95. And then that group over there, we're going to lower to 4.75. That is the only thing it allows them to do, is to determine which rate they do for each income bracket when they write a bill or they get ready to pass a budget and they want to increase taxes. If they wanted to do so, they still have to put that in a bill, put it in a budget, get it signed by the governor, and then it can happen. The only thing this amendment speaks to is the amount that each different income bracket can be taxed in a different way, period.
Can I just say something really quickly?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, just on the fair tax, I did vote yes. But as soon as I started getting a bunch of emails from the Illinois Policy Institute, and I knew that it was a very right-wing, conservative, rich person institute organization, I was like, yeah, I'm voting for that tax. I'm voting for that amendment. and that was like the main reason why. I mean, like Kenneth said, like in a point, if you make more money than me, and if I'm in a certain area, I don't necessarily think that I should have the same tax bracket as a millionaire. I don't.
That flat tax rate thing just it doesn't make any sense at all. We're one of the very few states that still has.
It makes sense if you're super rich. It makes sense for those people who are paying for politicians and buying political ad space. It's a follow the money thing. It's the same thing with the race for presidency. Why are people raising $500 million trying to get a job that pays $180,000 a year? You know what I mean? It's like, when you look at what people are doing in politics. Yeah, follow the money.
Always.
Right. So to Ethan's point of what I'm waiting, Angelo, I'm sorry. Did you want to throw a comment?
So okay, just really quick. Well, Richard's speaking of to use the term patently false. Okay, there's a bit of nuance here. So I agree with you that it's not on face value that narrative that they're putting out there is obviously their narrative, and they are more of a conservative think tank, and dare I say there are some libertarians amongst them as well, and I understand that. But it also puts a little bit too much power in their hands as far as how those exactly, and you stated it correctly about how those percentages are raised and lowered in that arena. Okay. Now, when you have the problem is that when you have a complete dominance, and listen, I left Illinois for good reason. And you want to know what that reason was, is taxes. I was done. That's it. I left. I moved to Arizona. Okay. The thing is that what I find so hysterical is that, look, yes, we've had Republican governors, or I shouldn't say we anymore, but you guys have had Republican governors in the past. Let's see. Pritzker, obviously Democratic. Rauner was a lame duck, if you want to call it lame duck governor, and he had no power whatsoever, and there was nothing you could do about it. When you have a gentleman like Michael Madigan, who is a criminal of the highest order, and he needs to go, and he needs to retire and go to Florida or wherever the heck he wants to go, but he's a net detriment to the state of Illinois. I won't get into that. But to give that kind of power to when you know that you have the Senate, you will or will not have the House of Representatives in Illinois, you're stacking the deck in their favor. And if they can swing on any particular election cycle, swing the House, it gets rubber stamped through the House, it gets rubber stamped through the Senate, and now you have a Democratic governor. Well, guess what's going to happen? Okay, so that the check and balance has now been thrown out the window as far as your tax is concerned. Now, allow me to finish with this one last comment. There is still a $9 billion backlog that Illinois has to pay its vendors since 2016-17, when there was no budget, when there was all that talk about the Illinois or state of Illinois getting downgraded, their credit rating. That was the true impetus of why a budget was even passed. Okay, because they said, listen, if you don't pass a budget, we're gonna reduce your credit rating, which means you're not gonna be able to borrow money. So they didn't have a choice; they had to pass a budget. Okay, so the income tax that was increased that happened at that point in time, which raised it to 4.95, all that money, every single dollar of that went to the $14 billion. It was a $14 billion. That $5 billion went to that. It didn't go to any programs. It went to pay its vendors. Okay, now you also have in your lovely state of Illinois that has been Democratic ran top to bottom for the last 45 plus years, give or take. Yes, we've had the Republican governors. I understand that. You have $186 billion unfunded pension liability over the next 25 years, and there is no clue on how to pay for it. So I'm sorry, but it's very clearly evident that the policies that have been put in place over the last 40 years in Illinois are not good ones.
So what you're saying is people are going to get taxed regardless. Listen, and this has been my stance on this whole thing. People are going to get taxed regardless, right? People, especially poor people and low income people, are going to get taxed regardless. At least when we have Biden speaking to not taxing anyone under $400,000 in an income, we don't even know what Trump is doing. But when it comes to specifically here in Illinois, we're going to get taxed regardless. So why not allow for a different tax rate in different income brackets than having a flat tax rate altogether? How is that going to solve Illinois' deficit? Well, if at all.
To solve it really quick, and I know that obviously Richard wants to reply, I can tell. To solve this problem, you have to acknowledge that the deals that were cut back in the early 2000s when it came to the state worker unions pension funds were not valid to begin with when they guaranteed them. Okay, they were promised. I'm sorry, they pandered to the middle class. They said we're going to guarantee your pensions. They wrote it into the Illinois state constitution with no guaranteed way of paying for it. In other words, they didn't attach a revenue stream, aka tax, to make sure that those pensions were paid. Okay, they just said we're going to kick the can down the road and we'll figure it out later. Well, I got news for you. You got to pay the piper. And guess what? There's no money.
I do want to give everyone a chance to respond to this. And then after that, let's move back into the country as a whole.
Sorry. Yes, I digress.
Richard, go ahead.
Couple things. One, Rauner was not a lame duck. Rauner did exactly what he was sent to do. I worked for Senator Kirk Dillard's campaign to be the governor of the state of Illinois. Bruce Rauner won a nomination from my party, which is the Republican Party. I'm no fan of Mike Madigan, but I knew from the beginning what Rauner was trying to do. He was trying to bankrupt the state, and he almost did it. His point was to try to bankrupt the state so we could do one of those Detroit, Orange County things so he can invalidate the very pensions that you're talking about. As far as those pensions being unfunded, that's not actually the truth. The truth is, those pensions, I want you to listen, the state worker pensions, the state workers pay into those pensions. Those pensions are matched by funds. As you know, they're invested. The state pensions kept making money. The problem was the money kept getting took out. You couldn't right now tell the state workers, you know, we're going to switch you over to a more 401k. Was it a 403b program? You can't do that. Why? Because the state of Illinois cannot pay all the interest it took, all the money it took from the workers themselves, not to mention the fact that they didn't fund their portion of it as agreed. That corruption goes back to Jim Thompson. So Republican and Democratic administrations are responsible for what we have right now in our state. And yes, it is time to pay the piper. At some point, we're going to have to pay. Either way it goes. So even if you're just looking at the $9 billion that we're in debt that Ronner put us in by him not trying to negotiate. I'm not a fan of Mike Madigan. I've been a Republican since 1990. I'm not a fan of Mike Madigan. But honestly speaking, we're actually lucky he was there, because if Ronner had his way, the state would have been bankrupt. His whole objective was to try to take away fair share union dues pays with Janice v. AFSCME, which he pushed through. That was his objective, and he did it. All right. He had no desire to have a balanced budget. He wanted to be in the quandary that the state was in. That was his objective. And it's an embarrassment to my party that he actually won a nomination in regard to Bruce Ronner. Now, in regard to the fair tax, I'm agreeing with Rick. The bottom line is, and just anyone listening, if you vote yes, your taxes are going to go up. If you vote no, your taxes are going to go up more. It's just that simple. Our state is in a bad situation because of mismanagement over all these years that we can all agree upon. I'm not going to blame the Democrats, because the Republicans have their hand in it too. Everybody was involved. Governor Edgar was involved. He was a Republican. Governor Thompson, a Republican. Governor Ryan, a Republican. All right, working with these Democratic administrations. And it's not just Chicago's fault. It's not just the Democrats' fault. It is all of us as citizens of the state. We created a situation that put us in a bad way. So now we got to dig out of it. And that's just as simple as that. With this pandemic happening, it's just only made things worse with the mismanagement that the federal government didn't do their part, that let the states have to freestyle and do what they wanted to do. So again, with Ronner, he did what he tried to do, except he didn't get to bankrupt the state. He just almost bankrupted the state. He did get his fair share dues thing passed through the Supreme Court when he backed Janice and Janice v. AFSCME. So he's a hero to many of the oligarchs out there, because he got that passed, which affects the whole country. All right. But as far as that pension program, that is a red herring that's been used for the last 15 years to try, and it's never explained fiscally how it really works, what really happened to the money, what really happened to the money the state workers put in, that the state never put the money in it was supposed to, and it took the state workers' money and all the interest that they made, because these funds that were managed by T. Rowe Price, they kept making money. So the bottom line is, yeah, if we're all fair people here, what do you want to do? Take these people's money and not give it to them because it was mismanaged by politicians you voted for? Come on, it doesn't work that way. At some point, we got to, if you float a check long enough and everybody's benefiting from that check being floated with these nice roads and infrastructure we have in the state of Illinois that you don't have in those red states like Mississippi, all right? All this stuff we have, if we're going to have that, we got to pay for it at some point. You can only float a check for so long. So I really don't accept the argument, well, we shouldn't pay for it. Who should then? If you create a bill, because those people in Springfield didn't go there by themselves, we sent them there. Is what it is. So we're responsible. That's how democracy works. So
I have to laugh at that because I feel the same way.
One quick thing that you said about when you said about the economy and workers. All right, let's go more basic than Keynesian theory versus supply side. Let's go more basic than that. Let's just go with power and rent seeking, the power dynamic. You said workers should organically be able to get together and demand a better wage, but since Reagan, all right, even before then they tried to do it, but since Reagan, systematically, they have taken power away from workers, which is what this court is about. All right, the Scalia court, all these conservative justices, that ruling I talked to you just now about, AFSCME v. Janice, took power away and therefore gave a distortion of power, distortion of control of the system to multinational corporations above workers and consumers. It's not a fair game. The government may not be able to just throw money in to make things work or say this is the wage you need to pay, but It's not organic. It's distorted. It's distorted by the rich and powerful. They've distorted the system where workers can't get a fair shake. We can't even organize anymore in most places. You can't organize because of rules that have been passed. You can't be in a union shop because of rulings like Janice, if you ask me to organize. They've systematically undermined the whole labor movement in the last 20, 25 years. And this is through Supreme Court rulings. So you have to acknowledge that the government needs to be a fair arbitrator here and try to keep things balanced. We have a distorted system, and it's weighed heavily to the rich. And this court that we have right now has weighted heavily to multinational corporations and taken it out of the hands of the people. This is a result of that last election.
Which is what's definitely going to take place. Go ahead, Ethan.
Godless, did you, before we move on, did you want to respond to any of that?
Well, I'm not from Illinois, and so I really don't know a lot about the Illinois politics. Sorry.
Well, I was going to ask Godless Granny, where are you?
Alabama.
Oh. My bad about the red snake comment. My bad.
Everyone's response
Alabama knows how to party.
All right. Kenneth.
Yo.
Did you, before we move on, did you have anything you wanted to add or?
Well, there was one thing that stood out to me about what Richard said. He said a lot of good stuff, but my favorite thing and maybe my least favorite thing about this nation that we live in is that our government is a direct reflection of our priorities as voters and how well informed and how educated we are. I mean, we truly get the politicians we deserve. One of the things that drives me nuts about Illinois, I'm another Illinois person, Gigi. I'm up, I'm in Chicago with Rick and Cynthia. Richard, are you in Chicago as well? Yeah. See, all right. So we're all in this boat together. I cannot stand when I talk to people who just sort of shrug their shoulders and say, "Well, Illinois is a corrupt state, so it just is how it is. That's just what it's like here," and then keep electing the same people over and over again. I mean, we're going way back in time. I was a congressional intern years and years ago, and at that point in time, Congress had like a 9% approval rating and like a 90% incumbency rating. So if you ask any random person on the street what they think of politicians, they'd be like, they all suck, they're crooks, they stink. What about your guy? Oh, that guy's great. We're going to keep that guy. It's all the other guys that stink, and they keep electing the same people. So again, I just think that that being informed, paying attention, maybe doing some work on some, trying to build some sound epistemology among the electorate would be nice. That's the battle from where I'm sitting.
Speaking to that, being informed on voting, that is one thing that I was absolutely shocked at when I moved to Alabama. Before I lived here, I used to live in Indiana. And when we lived in Indiana, every year, every time there was an election, whether it was a primary or a general election, we received in the mail a sample of the ballot. And so we had at least 2 weeks where we knew exactly what was on the ballot. And in addition to that, we also usually got from the League of Women Voters something explaining what proposed amendments were, a little bit about the candidates. And it was always very balanced. It never leaned either direction. And I loved it. It was wonderful. And since I've moved to Alabama, not only do we not get a copy of the sample ballot, when I went online to try to find out what was on the ballot, I couldn't even find it. My son is in college, and so my son requested an absentee ballot. As soon as it came, we were all, okay, so what's on the ballot? Because we didn't even know.
So thank you, Godless. Cynthia, you wanted, so in a moment, we're going to move back onto the nation overall, but you had said you wanted to clarify something you said earlier.
Yeah, I think that Marsha said, I'm trying to see exactly what she said. As far as like the reason why I voted for the fair tax because of the Illinois Policy Institute, I think that she thought I said because they are white, and that's not what I said. I said the Illinois Policy Institute is a very right-wing, conservative, rich organization, and which I'm pretty sure. Well, I'm telling you, when I looked up the officers, yeah, they were white, But that's not why I voted against them or voted for the Illinois fair tax. It wasn't because they're white. It was because the leaning of that particular institution is a very right-wing, conservative, rich organization. So since I am none of that, I was voting for the fair tax. And also, I just want to piggyback on what Kenneth said, and you too, Gigi, about when it comes to what do you know when it comes to who's running in your area. And I think that if anything, I'm hoping from the last election and this particular election that it has inspired people to be more politically engaged and to take time to be more politically educated.
Right.
Oftentimes, as Kenneth eloquently said, you get the politics you vote for. So if we're constantly voting for people who are not representing our interests, people who are not doing the things that they're supposed to do when they're in office, people who are constantly engaged in corrupt politics, that's what we're going to continuously get. I mean, I think that one of the things that a lot of people need to understand is that you being an electorate, really you are the boss. You choose who goes into office. So it makes, and I would think that if you keep that in mind when you're going to the ballot, then you need to take the time to research who's on the who's researching who's a candidate, because they are a candidate. Think about it. When you are going in for a job, you're being interviewed, right? And they're interviewing you to see if you are the best qualified candidate for the position that you are applying for. And you had to meet some type of our criteria in order for you to be interviewed in the first place. Why can't we think like that when it comes to our candidates? Why can't we think about them as far as like, this is the job that they want. I'm going to interview them in as best way as possible to see if they actually supposed to earn my vote. So that means also to not only researching your candidates, like going to ballotready.org or Ballotpedia.
I did ballot.
And also going to their websites, finding out what they are, what type of platforms they're standing for. Also, why don't you engage them by contacting their offices? Why don't you email them? Why don't you go to town halls that they're part of so that you can ask questions? You know, if we did more of these things, I really believe that a lot of the politics that we see on the macro level will start to change because we the people are actually doing our part as the people.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have to say about that.
So what I would like to move on from here is to immigration. So, you know, we've got two different sides, but yes, there is a third one. You know, we've got Donald Trump, who wants stricter regulations, wants to stop those illegals from coming in here. I personally think we need to stop calling them illegals. It's a dehumanizing term.
They call them undocumented workers here.
Yeah. Then we have Biden, who unfortunately, I don't really know his immigration policies. And then we have Jo Jorgensen, who wants all open borders. She had said that she this is verbatim what she actually said in a podcast. I watched her say she wanted to have open borders like they did in the early 1920s. It's exactly what she said. So that being said, where are we at on immigration? Godless, what do you think?
Well, immigration is is the first reason why I was so against Trump way back when he was in the primaries in 2015. I was terrified that we were going to see exactly what we did see, which is, you know, people being picked up, scooped up, and dumped into other countries primarily because of racial profiling. And, you know, if you watch John Oliver on this, there have been U.S. citizens that have been picked up by ICE because they appear to be Latino and have been taken and deported. I even read the case of a man who's an Army vet that was deported because he was Latino. And yeah, in addition to that being part of the problem, another part of the problem is a lot of these undocumented workers are here because we invited them here. Especially like when we built the Olympic Village in Atlanta in 94, 95. We invited Mexican workers to come here. The farmers in California and other places, they invite the migrant workers in. They need them. And so for us to just say, well, hey, you came in the country illegally, now we don't want you anymore, get out. We need to give these people a path to be able to stay in the country.
Thank you, Godless. Angelo.
Yes. No, Joe did say that, but there's more to it than just that. I don't know if you want me to get into that, but anyway.
If you can summarize it very quickly, you can.
Okay. Her platform is also that we need to protect our borders. So although the term open borders, everybody thinks, everything's just willy-nilly and anybody who cares to walk into our country can do so, that's not really the libertarian platform on that. It just requires, or actually not requires, but calls for, I won't even get into it because it's too far to describe. But anyway, did you want me to go further as far as that's concerned, or do you want to hand it over to somebody else?
So yeah, if you can summarize it quickly.
Quickly, it's more about, again, it's going to be economically based. It's if there's workers that need to come into our country to fulfill certain positions, which obviously it does, or we do, I should say, excuse me, and that's clearly evident when it comes to your hard labor jobs. I mean, working in fields and so on and so forth. There's a sector of our economy that, look, let's just face it, the average American doesn't want to do the job. I mean, that's just reality, and it has been the case for quite a while. To Godless Granny's point right there, that there are positions that need to be filled, and your average person, your average American here that grew up in this country is not going to do it. Not for that wage, not for any wage. You could give a kid right now $40 an hour to go in the fields and pick pick fruits and vegetables. I don't think they're going to do it. Okay, because they've been raised to have a completely different set of ideologies and a thought process when it comes to being successful in this country, and that they've been fed this narrative that you have to go to college and have a degree and have some sort of job in tech or something, to that nature. But also, we do need a path to citizenship. Okay, and let me just continue on with this really quick. There absolutely needs to be a path to citizenship. Okay, I am the product of two immigrant parents. I'm very proud of the fact my parents came, my father came on a work visa. That is the type of program that we need to have. Okay, we have to come to reality that, to Ethan, something that you said before in a prior podcast, we cannot help everyone in this world. That's not realistic.
Right.
We do need to have a program that is a little bit more fluid, and we need, for those that are already here, we need to have a path to citizenship for them, which we can obviously do.
Thank you. All right. Who'd like to go next?
I can speak a little bit about immigration. I am a daughter of an immigrant. My mother came in from Jamaica into 1963. But my father is a descendant of chattel slavery. So one of the things I will say about immigration is that I think that the system that we're currently working with needs to be overhauled. And the reason why I say that is because oftentimes in some circles, sometimes immigration can be weaponized in order to kind of, I don't want to say devalue, but it can be an issue when it comes to workers, like essential workers specifically, that work lower wages and they may not necessarily be preferred because they don't have to be paid as much. And for example, is anyone familiar with when there was an ICE raid, I want to say some months ago in Mississippi at a chicken plant?
Random ICE raids throughout the country. I know Chicago had a few quite often.
Yeah, but specifically for this particular chicken plant, in Mississippi. Apparently, this particular plant was participating in what they call like, I don't want to call it the Hispanic strategy or the Mexican strategy. They called it one or the other, where they were systematically bringing in undocumented workers to work in these particular plants, so they didn't necessarily have to pay them the wage that they should be paid, nor did they have to pay them any type of benefits like, you know, insurance and things of that nature. So oftentimes, and if you don't know like the demographics of Mississippi, Mississippi is predominantly a Black state. But regardless, so a lot of the people who could have been working those particular jobs, that they were, if it was done correctly as far as like the hiring process goes and what they should have been paid as far as like wage and also benefits, you know, they could have, you know, made a pretty decent living. However, because we have this dichotomy when it comes to corporations and also, you know, porousness when it comes to undocumented workers, we have this problem. So when I say, and then of course, like sometimes when I voice my concerns about this, like some people say, well, you're against immigrants. Not at all. Like I said, why would I say that? I'm a daughter of an immigrant. However, I would want the system to be overhauled so that people who are here can actually have a path to citizenship if they were brought here from children's age with their parents, things of their nature. But to make sure the system is not impeding on people who have been here, who is constantly being, who may be shuttled into particular positions where they're not able to get a job or they're getting paid less because of the way that the job is set up.
No, go ahead, Richard.
Richard, and then after Richard, we'll go to Kenneth.
I'm going to have to agree with Cynthia, and I think that the system does need to be looked at in a fundamentally different way. And I think we need to look at what's happening in a different way. Like when I was talking to Angelo about the whole distortion of labor, the distortion of the commodity of labor, illegals or undocumented workers who come in this country and are utilized by large corporations like Dole or Purdue, or utilized even in construction work or all kinds of different areas, because it's not just farm workers. Up here in Illinois, if you look at most of the people that you'll see working on road jobs, working on houses, they are undocumented workers. These are right. Right. So you bring people into the system. This further distorts the labor pool and it distorts wages in the benefit of the wealthy. The wealthy now do not have to pay that person a decent wage. They don't have to give them insurance benefits. What recourse do they have? They can't go and vote. They can't go complain to their congressman. They can't join a union. So that what can they possibly do? So what you basically have with undocumented workers is a group of exploited individuals. And I fundamentally reject the notion. Then this is a notion that comes from a lot of times from business owners, that Americans won't do the job for wage. No, Americans will do the job for the wage that is the true cost of that particular labor. No, is an American going to go work for $5 an hour, $10 an hour, picking cotton or picking lettuce or whatever? No, when they can go to Portillo's and make $15 an hour, why would they? All right. But that distortion of labor, creates a distortion of wages. You have an exploited population that has no recourse, that can be exploited. And again, this is not just out in the fields. This is the people that we see working on houses, doing a lot of construction, rehab work. These are people that work in the restaurants up here in Illinois. I know managers of different restaurants, even corporate restaurants, that will admit most of their workforce is illegals or undocumented persons. I don't mean to offend anybody.
Used to be.
So this is a reality. You can't tell me that you can't find a kid to work at McDonald's for $12 an hour and that you have to hire the undocumented person for $8. That's a distortion in labor, which causes a distortion in wages for everybody. So I think that needs to be fundamentally dealt with. If we're going to have guest workers come to this country to do this work, then we need to assign them a number when they walk through the door and give them some rights so they can't be exploited by these multinational large corporations like Purdue and Dole and all the people that own those farm confederacies. So they can't be exploited, so they can actually have safe work environments. Some of the work environments and some of the farms I saw down in North Carolina, horrible. Americans wouldn't work there because OSHA wouldn't let them. But OSHA don't know because they're illegals and they can't tell. That's exploiting labor. Why are we allowing very rich people to get over like that? And if we got to pay $1 more for a head of lettuce, so be it. But as a conversation we need to have as a country about what our priorities are. Are we okay with these people being exploited and our wages being distorted if we can get a head of lettuce for $1 cheaper? If we agree with that, so be it. But if we're not okay with that, then we need to have that discussion as a country and ask for public policy that backs up what we the result that we want. I think oftentimes our public policy discussions are, let's change the result before we actually change the cause. We have to look at the causes of these results before anything else can change.
And I think that's a conversation also, Richard, that can take place at the local level and then move that up.
So
You know what I mean?
I actually, if you, real quick, I want to address this comment. A business owner can't afford it unless you want to pay $25 for a hamburger. See, to me, that is a myth propagated by capitalism. There are
Absolutely
countless businesses that
I agree.
Portillo's pays $15 an hour to those kids. $15 an hour.
And
They have a lot of.
And can I also? I'm
No, go
sorry.
ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I was just. Oh no, I was just going to say also too. Even going back to the conversation concerning like the government as far as like helping the economy. Can we not forget that this past March, that $2.2 trillion went out in the CARES Act, and the majority of that went to corporations. The government is always propping up corporations all the time in order for this particular economy to function, just in case something happens. I mean, we see it countless times over and over again. So to even say that, like, well, if that's going to be the case and that's going to cause like, prices to go up, et cetera, to this inflated amount, I don't agree with that. Oftentimes, like if these particular systems are done correctly, and we actually have these particular conversations from the local to the federal level, this can be done to the point where people are not exploited, people are actually getting a living wage, and we don't necessarily have to worry about inflated prices being constantly pushed upon us.
I feel like the whole immigration conversation, especially when it comes to undocumented immigrants, it just seems like the new racism, the new caste system for racism, right? Not to take anything away from what we as Black Americans, specifically the ADOS community, are affected by, but also that this is another byproduct of like white supremacy. Like this is another integrated racial system, racist system against, specifically to Godless Granny's point, an attempt to be able to go after the Latinx community. So what is our federal government doing? And we currently have an administration that doesn't even want to admit that systemic racism exists.
Well, Rick, I'm just going to throw this in there. I'm going to leave it alone. It always has been that way with immigration. When immigrants were coming from the Mediterranean countries, when they're coming from Slavic countries, understand when they came to this country, they were not considered white. Italians were not considered white. They dealt with racism when they came to the United States of America. W. Du Bois worked with the Slavic community as they came over here. They were exploited people as well until until the powers that be, be it government, be it business, decided it's better for them to be white. Let's give them their white card so we can move them this way. And it's going to happen to the Latinx community too. I guarantee you within the next 20 years, you're going to see a significant portion of, because presenting them as Latinx community is a fiction, number one. You have Cubans, Mexicans, Puerto Rican, you have all kinds of different peoples that see themselves very differently. A Puerto Rican in New York sees himself very differently than a Cuban in Florida, who sees himself very differently than a Mexican in Texas. And I guarantee you, Trump is going to get more of a Latin vote than he got last time. Yes, I guarantee you, just like with the Italian population, the reason why it's been slower, that the Latinx community, ultimately, a lot of Latinx people are going to go white. That's why that question in the census is Hispanic non-white, Hispanic white. Look at what's happening. Yeah. I guarantee you they're going to be absorbed into the dominant culture, the ones who can. Those of us whose hair is a little too curly or skin is a little dark going to get stuck with us. That's what's going to happen. All right. And they're going to keep it moving.
That's how race came in. That's how race came in.
But this has happened with different immigrant groups throughout history through the United States. Yeah. Irish were the first non-white whites that got their whiteness in order to separate those Irish immigrants and indentured servants from black slaves. This is just it's the same tactic that keeps getting used over and over. And we're ultimately going to, right now they're the scapegoat because, Trump is a white nationalist and he has to have his white nationalist scapegoat. But ultimately you're going to see a portion of the Latinx community move into the white side. I guarantee you we see that within the next 2 years.
And I just want to touch on that real quick, and then I'm going to shut up. To your point, Richard, you're absolutely correct. And I'll just give you an idea. The census in 2010, the ones who, first off, Hispanic is considered, ethnicity is not considered a race. And secondly, in the 2010 census, only less than 3% of Hispanic identifying people actually denoted their race as Black. And I'll leave it at that.
Kenneth, I would think you're the resident immigration expert here. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my day job is that I work for the Department of Homeland Security for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. My actual job is adjudicating immigration cases. So, today I interviewed people from a half dozen countries and made decisions about what their future is going to be in the United States under our current system. Richard is right about that our immigration system has roots in racial discrimination. It began with the Irish, then the Germans. Then in the 1880s, you had the Chinese Exclusion Act, where you're saying no more Asian people, get them out of here. They built the railroads, we're done with them. Then leading into 1917, you get a literacy requirement and that's a perfect example of a law that had a disproportionately racist impact on people. Then in 1924, you get the first Immigration Act where you get racial-based quotas systems going into effect, and the Border Patrol came around at the same time. Our immigration laws essentially went into effect in 1965 and have not been significantly changed since the mid-1990s. Administrations come and go with different emphases on what they want to do policy-wise within that framework that we've had since the 90s, but there hasn't been any real action taken. So it is definitely a system. I'm very conflicted about it because I see people successfully come through the system every day. I see us helping out people. I see us catching people who probably shouldn't be here and prosecuting them. I also see the system harm people who are essentially innocent. So it is definitely a work in progress, but it's a work in progress that the work isn't really getting done. So
if I can just real quick to ask you, from your experience, where do we start to have the conversation to make the change? Is it at the federal level? Is it at the local state level? Like where do we begin to have the change that's needed?
I think Rick nailed it, because the question needs to be about what do we want our immigration system to do? Do we want to exploit people for economic benefit? Do we want to be a safe haven for people who are persecuted around the world? What are we trying to do here? And without a clear path moving forward, without a clear identity in a sense of what our ideals are, we're just floating along with the same system we've had since 1996. I think that's the key.
Gotcha. Wow. Hey, so immigration. I don't even. Where's the third party? Where does Green or Libertarian Party? Oh, we talked about Joe Jorgensen's stance on immigration, which.
Sorry. We don't have much time left, so I don't feel like, no offense, Angelo, we should waste time on Joe Jorgensen's immigration policy. What else can we quickly cover in a short period of time that we haven't?
If I could take this opportunity to throw this in there for a second, because I need to address a post that I made, and Angelo and I had a bit of a back and forth about it briefly, and it ties into the conversation. I know we have this big discussion, and I know we always put this big emphasis on our executive branch and the election, but there are so many other positions on the ballot that need to be looked at, need to be researched, and so on and so forth. I made a post about what I call identity voting. And it was very specific to all 62 judges or 63 judges that were up for retention in Cook County specifically. And Gigi, I'm so sorry. I don't know if this is the same in Alabama where you have judges that are up for retention votes. However, when you have that many people on a ballot that you are deciding something, if you're voting for, I think a few of them were up for election for position versus the bulk of them, which I think actually were 62 of them, were up for retention here in Illinois, or in Cook County specifically. There tends to be this identity voting that happens. And I've talked about this on my previous show, Rick's Room, that I had on a radio show years ago, that I've fallen victim to this. And I'm almost certain that just about anyone else potentially could do. The post was simply to say that you have to be careful of identity voting, meaning you look at a name and think that that name might be someone who you can identify with ethnically, who you can identify with racially, right? It's one of those things that you see a name. I almost would think that an Irish person would also do it. There's 62 judges. Who has had the time to go and research all of their history, if they're worth staying on? I mean, some of y'all just went no to all of them, Cynthia, but I understand that because somebody else said that too. But I almost would think that someone who's Irish or someone who's Italian would see a name and be like, yo, that sounds like a name that might be my cousin's name, so maybe I should, because it's 62 judges on the ballot. The post was to address the fact that identity voting in that manner can be dangerous. And the example that I used was James Brown, Judge James R. Brown, I put James Brown, is not a black man. And dear Lord, I saw some of the Trump supporters go into an uproar about race. So I know, Angelo, you commented on it. I wanted to get that point out there to clarify. It had nothing to do with voting based on race. It was simply to identify that there are 62 judges that I'm sure no one has done research on all of them. And you get into a trap where you see a name that you can identify with and think that that might be someone to vote for, when in fact, that person looks nothing like you. You had a comment that you wanted to address with that, Angelo. I'll give you the floor to go ahead and do it.
Sure.
2 minutes less, because we do have to wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay. So I thought about this all day long, actually, after you posted and I commented. And I completely understand where you're coming from, and I'm very sympathetic to what you just said, because I found myself in prior situations of looking at a name and saying, yeah, okay, I kind of know who that might be, and I'll vote for them. Basically, what I would like to just kind of communicate to all the people watching and the people that obviously were on that post is that if we don't know something about someone when it comes to an elected or an official that will be elected, especially when it comes to a judge, just don't vote. Just don't vote for either one. If you don't know who they are, the best thing to do is just not vote for either one of them and leave it blank. Do yourself a favor and do a little bit of research on it, because it's one thing to vote down ballot like we're talking about before and say, hey, I'm just a Democrat and I vote Democratic no matter what. Well, not in all. I'm not sure. I don't remember in Illinois, for some reason it's not coming to mind. But in Arizona, the judge's name next to their name is not a D or an R. Right.
It wasn't in Illinois either. It's a yes or no. It's a yes or no. But again, there's not a lot of information out there. Like you would have to talk to attorneys that have sat in front of these judges and litigated cases in front of them. Right. That's not there. There's limited information. So the post literally was just that. When voting down ballot, get as much information as you can, but try to avoid identity voting.
Good.
All right. So we do actually need to find a way to wrap this up.
Let's wrap it up.
What I want to do is give everyone 2 minutes to kind of give your own closing argument, who you're voting for or who you'd recommend voting for.
We've all voted. You're the only one who hasn't voted.
For and why. So, Angelo, let's start with you.
Well, can we also include how people can connect with you or reach you on social media?
There you go. Yeah, make that perfect.
Sure. So starting with connecting with me, my handle, if you will, on Twitter is Libertarian Reason. So you can find me that way. And then obviously my name on Facebook, which is Angelo Mazzei. So I have my page as well. But put simply, we can't look to change the system if we continue to vote for it. You don't feed the monster. Okay. You have to kill the monster. You have to slay it in some way, shape, or form. And that's pretty much what I would say to anybody watching this show or listening, that if we continue to vote D or R, real change really isn't going to happen in this country. And in that sense of us getting back the power as the people, that it really truly is in our hands, and we have the power as citizens, not the bureaucrats and the politicians that are in place, because unfortunately at this point over the last 100 years, they are now essentially the same party. Okay. I know that they try to convince us otherwise and say that, no, there are true differences. There are some differences, obviously. Okay. But at the end of the day, they're working against us. Who's us? Those of us that are not in politics, those of us that are the people and the citizens of this country, the hardworking people that wake up every morning and go to their jobs. Okay. They have slowly but surely depleted our power. So I will leave you with that.
And Angelo, there is a lot of what you said that I agree with. And I do want to work to get a third party candidate back on the main stage. I really do. I just, this time I'm unwilling to, sacrifice and take a risk with Donald Trump. Richard Graves, 2 minutes or less, same question.
Okay. Well, as you all know, I'm Richard Graves from Richard Graves Group. You can follow me on Twitter. You can catch me on YouTube. And I do agree with Angelo on this primary premise that I don't care if they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green Party, Pink Party, Purple Party. It doesn't matter. If you don't hold politicians accountable, I don't care what DRI, whatever they have behind their name, hold politicians accountable. Do not reelect people just because. Hold them accountable. Right now, the problem with politics is politics, even with Trump, answers to people with a whole lot of money. And instead of us allowing that, we need to demand that they answer to us. And the only way we do that is by showing that we're willing to put them out and we're willing to put other people in. And for this election, I already voted for Joe Biden and Ms. Harris. I voted yes to our tax amendment for those of you in Illinois. Honestly speaking, Trump got to go. He's a white nationalist. He's a white supremacist. And the bottom line is he's just bad for this country. And honestly, Trump is a existential threat. I know each of our communities, we have our own objectives and our own things that are important to us. But bottom line is, I hate to say this, it's just like when you go to war. You got to put that to the side for this one, because this is going to be very bad if he wins. It's going to be bad for everybody. I don't care what if you're transgendered, straight, gay, black, white, immigrant, citizen, it's bad all across the board. All right. And that's all I got to say about it. It's going to be bad across the board. So hopefully people listen.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
And sorry, did you say where people can check you out at?
Yes, I did, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And just so you know, everyone on this panel, I do have either their website, Twitter, or YouTube links in the description of the YouTube video if you want to check them out. Except for Angelo, he doesn't have a Twitter. Cynthia.
Yeah. Okay, let me unmute myself. So I would say to any person, I'm supposed to plug myself, right?
That too.
Yeah. Other half of the 13% that usually airs Mondays on YFNA News. Just letting people know that in the winter, the 13% is going to be taking a break, but we will be back in January. So thank you for giving me grace. Anywho, as far as this particular election or any election goes, I would tell any person to please make sure that you are researching your candidates. Do not just vote for a party just because you've been doing that forever. It has to be a particular point in time where the people are actually standing up to say, this is what we want, and we're not going to just acquiesce to what you give us. I did not vote for Joe Biden. I did not vote for Kamala Harris. I did not vote for Donald Trump, and I did not vote for Mike Pence. I voted third party because none of those candidates actually jive with my sensibilities and what I feel is important. And that's why I did not vote for them. So, but I would tell any person, again, make sure that you are researching your candidates from the top down. Go to websites like ballotready.org and Ballotpedia. Learn about your candidates. Learn who's running on the local level. Become engaged in this particular process, not just in voting. Voting is the very basic thing that you can do as far as like civics is concerned. There are still advocacy that you can do on a wide range. Learn how to email your congressman. Learn how to call their offices. Learn about the different measures that's actually on the ballot and things that you care about and advocate for those things. Become a whole citizen, not just, I'm just going to go vote when election time comes.
Thank you, Cynthia. Wait, did we lose someone?
Richard had to step away.
Yeah, Richard bounced.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Godless Granny.
You can reach me on my YouTube channel as Godless Granny. You can also find me on Twitter. My main name says Godless Granny, but my handle is at Kelly Pearsall 3. Kelly Pearsall is my real name. As far as who to vote for, make sure you dump Trump. And yes, I voted for Biden-Harris because to me, the most important thing in this election, as Richard said, is getting rid of Trump, because as a trans parent, as a woman, as a Kaja who advocates for children's rights, Trump is just a threat to everything that I hold dear.
Thank you, Godless. And Mr. Kenneth Leonard.
Hey, so the plug is I've got a YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitter. On the YouTube channel, I'm getting ready this week to start an interview series that I'm really excited about. I'm shocked and amazed at the caliber of individual who have agreed to be interviewed on my little channel. So it should be something that's fun to tune into for the viewers. Leading up to the election, there's two things that are sticking with me. I can't endorse a candidate, but I think there's something more important for us all to think about. One is Thomas Jefferson's. He talked about how a well-informed electorate is essential for the preservation of a democracy. So please do the work of being informed. But as you do the work of being informed, in fact, before you go about getting informed, I'd like everybody here to do me a favor. The greatest political speech in American history was delivered by Frederick Douglass in July of 1852. It was called "What is the 4th of July to a Slave?" And what he talks about is that there's this nation where we talk about ideals of freedom and liberty and justice, but that to the slave population in the United States, this was like a sick joke, hearing these values talked about. But what he talked about in the speech was that America had the ability to change, that we'd changed before from colonies to an independent nation, and we could change again into a nation where we actually took our values seriously. So moving forward into the election, think about who you think America should be. If you're an American, if you're from somewhere else and you're watching this, enjoy the show, I guess. But for the rest of everybody, really, please think about this election as being a battle for the soul of our country, because that's what's happening. Good luck, and I hope you all vote.
Thank you, Kenneth. And real quick before we get out of here, I just want to post one photo. This is what Mr. Trump tweeted, and it friggin' pisses me off because it's just all lies. Like, where does he get this stuff from? Like, this is just propaganda bullshit. There's nothing true about this at all, except your kids will not be in school. I don't know if Biden's planning on closing down schools more, but outside of that, that's the only thing I could find that would be true.
It would only be true that we would close schools down until we got the pandemic under wraps. Let's not get started on that. Angelo, Kenneth, Cynthia, and Godless Granny, it's been a pleasure. Thank you all so much for your time. Thanks for being a guest on In Black and White. Thank you for your perspectives. Also, a big thank you to Richard Graves, who had to leave us. It's really been a pleasure having you on, and I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Ethan.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
That was a great episode, Rick.
Listen, and we didn't even have to talk about, it wasn't even Trump supporters. Imagine how a world would be if you didn't have Trump supporters. I'm sorry. It was a great conversation, and no one here supported Trump.
No, and what's funny is it didn't get heated either, one of the ones before. And we had a Republican, a Libertarian, Democrats, liberals. We had a good variety of people. I guess the only thing we had in common was we weren't voting for Trump. But
I think our last show that we did with I can't remember the gentleman's name, who was a Trump supporter who could be swayed because he actually felt like there was some new information that he learned, I think was a great conversation with an actual Trump supporter. But I'm not going to do this at the end of the day, but I will say at the black ass bottom line is we were able to have a great conversation without Trump supporters. Hey, for all of you all who are watching, thanks again for tuning in to another episode of In Black and White. We're going to miss Ethan for the time that he is not going to be here with us, but we do look forward to those cameo appearances that he's going to make. Again, if you watch this on Facebook, make sure to click the YouTube link so that you can follow our channel, subscribe to all of our content, and hit the alarm bell for all of when we go live. Be sure to check out the 13% on Monday nights with hosts Cynthia McDonald and Arthur Ward as they talk about Black policies and politics that affect the Black community. And we'll continue to build content as well. We have a Patreon link.
Yeah. All right. I should have put it in the comments. So if you sorry, Kay's Maze, I have a that very nice at the end of the day.
Yes, that's
it gets rid of caps automatically, so that wasn't intentional. But it is here to help mod. I will remove the caps lock thing. It's essentially to prevent us from getting spammers. Not to mention,
K-Maze is actually Kevin, and hopefully we'll get him on the show one day too as well. Tune in next week for In Black and White with Kendra Brielle. She'll be joining us as we tackle post-election jitters, probably some anxiety that we're going to have about the whole situation.
Yeah.
You can also catch us in just a few minutes, Ethan, myself, and Cynthia, on Sister Girl Radio, as we'll be discussing in the next live stream. In God We Trust or Not.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, everyone. Have a good night. If you like what we do, sign up for our Patreon for as low as $1 a month. Link is in the description. And as always, be safe out there. Wear a mask. And remember one thing. As long as there is racism to fight,
there'll always be In Black and White.
Good night,
everyone.